Hello friends, Angelo here. Welcome to another amazing video. We're gonna do a field trip, especially for these complicated psychological concepts like trauma and polarity consciousness. This is gonna blow you away because this is gonna explain an area that all of you think it's the best thing in the whole world. And I'm gonna share with you today that this thing that you think is the best thing in the whole world is actually a sign of trauma. A serious sign of trauma. And shame too, but trauma especially. So what are we talking about here? And before we get into it, I want to take a step back here because a lot of you probably thinking, oh no, I'm not traumatized. I'm not shamed. And it took me a long time to understand this, that we don't feel the trauma and the shame that is in our consciousness. We don't feel it. The only way to know that you have been traumatized is by looking at your behavior and looking at your value system and looking at your choices. So it's not in your feelings, because there is no feeling of trauma. There is no feeling of shame. You don't feel shameful. This is not the kind of shame that we are talking about where you made a mistake and then you feel a little shame. We are talking about trauma and shame that are unfelt. We know that it's there because the mind fragments itself and compartmentalizes itself. And the way that you know that you have trauma is if you compartmentalize other people and if you fragment other people. And there's a place in sexuality where everybody's doing it. Can you guess where it is? Yes, sexual compatibility. In order to understand this, there are two more concepts I have to introduce to you. One is idealization, and the other one is devaluation. These are the patterns of a fragmented mind. Every fragmented mind is going to idealize or devalue. So these are the two extremes of every single situation in the whole world. The two extremes are always, you go to the top or you go all the way down to the very bottom, which is you idealize or you devalue. So what are we doing with sexual compatibility? Of course, idealize or devalue. Someone is not your sexual compatible lover, you devalue. Someone is your sexual lover, you then idealize, you see? So he is your best friend until he's not sexually compatible, then he's your enemy. This is the way that the fragmented mind works. This is the way that a traumatized mind works. There's nothing in between. There's no desire to work through it. There's not even a desire to be near a man who's not sexually compatible. You see how really drastic this example is? You'll see it all across the board. I remember I used to do it before I learned about this. I don't do this anymore. I actually don't even want to know whether someone is a top or bottom or what someone's preferences are, because I know this is unhealthy. Because human beings are not sexual beings, and this is the foundation for the justification of this trauma behavior, this compartmentalization, this devaluation and idealization. I'm sure you've heard in the past people say, I am a sexual being and therefore I deserve to have a sexually compatible lover. But that already is a fragmented conversation, that already is a shamed and traumatized conversation. Because the foundation for it is the reductionary process of taking a human that has emotions, intellect, and a spirit, reducing him to genitals and sex. So the prerequisite for saying that I am a sexual being is the acknowledgement that you are not an emotional being, intellectual or spiritual being. And then we introduce the concept of sexual compatibility and everybody takes it without scrutinizing it, thinking about it, realizing that there's nothing healthy about reducing another human being to their genitals, sexual preferences, sexual mechanics, or anything that has to do with sexuality. All of that is a fragmentation, trauma, and it only leads to trauma bonding. You see? So all these tops and bottoms, these are trauma bonded couples. And this is one of the reasons why in the gay world you don't see any leadership, you don't see any higher level consciousness, because everyone is trauma bonded. And all those relationships, they're arrangements. There is no love, there's no true love in those relationships. It can never be there. Never. Ever. There is not one couple, when one is top and one is bottom, where there is true love. And it's a pretty sad thing to say. Very freaking sad thing to say. But this is the reality. And so how do you break through that? Well, you have to understand polarity consciousness. And the fact that you entered into the polarity consciousness, two polarities, the extremes. Devaluation, when someone is not sexually compatible, and then idealization, when someone is sexually compatible. Before you even get to the emotions, spirit, and the mind. You see how this is kind of like a shortcut to quickly figure out who someone is, but yet with human beings there are no shortcuts. So this is kind of like a game that a traumatized mind plays so that it receives validation. At the end of the day, it is about validation, and sexuality is being used instead of emotional and intellectual and spiritual compatibility or connection. And this is where shame comes in. So trauma is one thing, but shame is the miniaturization of all things human into something that's convenient because of the absence of validation. So validation is required for all human beings. Everyone right now is invalidated, but because many gay men lack emotional skills, communication skills, and spiritual skills, the only way they can validate each other is through sex. So that's why this whole narrative just goes on forever. And most people never wake up from it, because all kinds of psychological forces are set up in such a way that most don't even notice that they are captured by shame, by trauma, and idealization and devaluation forces. Basically, polarity consciousness. And I mean, to me, it's shocking that in the gay population, after all these years, that nobody talks about this. And there are all these books, Velvet, Rage, but these are surface level understandings of who we are and our sexuality. And this is the disappointment I've always had about the level of intellectual discussions and intellectual rigor in the gay population. There is no intellectual gravitas in the gay population. And this is why we are all struggling, all of us. Because in order to come out of our struggles, we have to reach higher consciousness. And this higher consciousness is not reachable when human beings are traumatized and when they are shamed. And this is why when I designed the Big Gay Family Social Program, I knew that I had to build something that will take people out of shame, out of trauma. This is incredibly difficult to do, especially if people are addicted to sex. They are looking for sexually compatible lovers, writing off everybody else. This is very difficult to do. But I succeeded, and we have implemented inside the Big Gay Family Social Program the kind of methodology that protects you from the self-sabotage that comes out of this idealization and devaluation of people when they enter your life based on your sexual preferences. And this is why our program stands out amongst all dating platforms in the whole world, because we are not going to let people traumatize each other sexually or devalue each other sexually. Now let's take a step back here. I want to share with you something else. And this has to do with masculinity and being a man. I've come to realize that the moment that you turn a man into a sex object, you destroy him. The moment that you even ask him what he likes to do sexually, the moment that you introduce the sexual topic altogether, you rapture his sense of self. Men are not supposed to be interacting through sex. We're not supposed to be looking at each other like sex dolls or like sex puppets. That in itself raptures a man's self-esteem. I've learned this over many years after thinking about masculinity, being a man, becoming a strong man, and realizing every time someone introduces sexuality, it always raptures the sense of self, the sense of self-esteem, as if we are sexual beings. And we are not sexual beings, we are spiritual beings, and sexuality is just a part of us. And the people that idealize sexuality are also experiencing trauma of existential level, where they reduce themselves to a miniaturized version of themselves. When you look at the statue of David by Angelo in Paris, I actually have been there, I've seen the statue myself, and there's something really weird about that statue. David has a small penis. And yet when you look at his hands, one of his hands, especially the right hand, is very big. And I thought to myself, why would Michelangelo, this famous artist, this genius, why would he give David a small penis? And why would he give him a gigantic hand? And the reason is very simple. He was trying to communicate to man the following: you should never be defined by your sexual organs. You should be defined by your creations. And that's why his hand is so gigantic. Not because he's going to be fisting somebody, but no, his hand is gigantic because it's a symbol of creation. And this is what men are all about. So the moment you introduce sexual compatibility, which is the polarity consciousness, you fuck up the entire gestalt of a male psychic. You fuck up a man from top to bottom across different levels. You basically take away from a man his purpose, his destiny, which is creation. So when I talk to people and they say, oh, Paul, you're beautiful, or you handsome, I don't really pay attention to that. The only thing I want to be judged by is by my creations. And so that's the Big Gay Family Social Program, all my coaching programs, and all the services that I offer. And this is how men should be judged. They should be judged by their creations, not by their sexual organs or their sexual preferences or whether they're top or bottom or what they want to do sexually. That is such a traumatized and miniaturized way of thinking that it's shocking. It's really shocking to even recognize this and to realize that this is the world that we live in. We live in a world where everyone is traumatized. Everyone is shamed. And we are asking the question, why is everyone single? That's why. That's why everyone is single. Because of this polarity consciousness. So I'm curious to see about your comments, your thoughts, and your suggestions. I hope this has been helpful for you. There is a way to come out of this. Join us at the Big Gay Family Social Program, where we don't lead with genitals, we lead with our hearts, our minds, our spirits. It's a totally different world for gay men. So join us, visit the website biggayfamily.com and step outside of your polarity consciousness and create the most beautiful relationships of your life. Okay, my friends, I'll be signing off. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe if you're new to my channel. I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next video. And for those of you who want to look into polarity consciousness, please look it up under the umbrella of narcissism. That's a very common topic, narcissism and polarity consciousness, and you're going to understand this subject a lot more. My friends, I'll be signing off now for real. I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next video. Signing off. Ciao for now. Bye.